So please, I can help take the first question. Yes?
The talk you presented, which was very, very interesting and very enlightening, was a talk primarily about the Israelis and the Arabs. Isn't the problem really tripartite with the Israelis, the Arabs, and the Americans? And in what way can the United States behave to help this situation?
How can the Americans help the situation?
Politically.
Should we take it one by one?
What do you prefer?
It's up to you.
Yeah, let's.
It was back in 1974 that the Arabs, at the time you could comfortably call them Arab dictators, basically gave the torch of Palestinian nationalism to the United States. And then they launched Arafat from the UN podium as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. Of course, he ended up in Gaza some 20 years later. But it was the Palestinians. It was no longer the Arabs. And that is problematic in the sense that between the Palestinians and the Arabs, between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the relationships are so disymmetrical that without, and here's the third part, again, you see, it's always Trinity. without an honest broker, without the so-called international community, it's very hard to translate a dissymetry between two parties that are not convinced. See, because if the two parties are convinced, meaning the victor says, okay, this is it, I'm glad where I am, and the nation, or whatever, the party that is defeated says, okay, that's fine, I give up. Then you can make a deal. But when neither party is satisfied, you need the third party to reset the lack of equilibrium between the two parties. I think, don't you think, it's a fact of life, that the United States aggravated the dissymetry between Palestine and Israel because the United States was Israel's special power. I think the best thing the United States can do today, and here I mean Washington, I think America has a great role to play. I think Washington should play less of a role. I think the less role Washington plays, the better it is for Israel. In what sense? In the sense, I think, if the United States stops Washington, stops putting wrenches in the international community's movement, and here, in this case, it is the UN. It is the UN Security Council. I mean, unless Washington decides that, okay, I will let things be, let the Europeans, the Arabs, the Russians, the Chinese, whoever, that they are resolving everything else, it seems, around the world, from southern Sudan to whatever, let them deal with this, and I will be part of this. Not that I will lead from behind, not that I will veto everything that I don't like because I was told by Israel. Not, that I would say I failed after 18 years, that Washington will do a good auto-critique of why it failed over the last 18 years. And I think draw or conclude that perhaps I need help. And I need help not from Tony Blair. Because Tony Blair is on payroll. Tony Blair will do and say what you ask him to do and say. He comes to the State Department, he negotiates his salary, he goes, he comes. I mean, he works for JP Morgan. I mean, the guy is very intelligent, very well spoken, very likable. He's just become Catholic. But he's not a partner. That's not the person you want. So I think the lesson of Washington on this process, I think, is going to be better, at least in the area.
Yes, back there.
I had a question for the speaker. Do you think the regional developments, the Arab Spring, and the fact of your comments about the two parties drifting further away from engaged peace negotiation, do you think the risk of war is heightened? That there be some sort of military action from some party that would engulf the entire region, so it's some kind of a war? and what your perspective on what the military situation is in that part of the region.
There are two processes that are going on, and with very little, predictability. One is that we hear outbursts, like the one we just heard 2 days ago, apparently, or reportedly, from Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, which says that if there's any international intervention in Syria, we will shower Israel with missiles. And when that doesn't work, or as that happens, if that doesn't deter the international community, then Iran is going to start showering Israel and the American forces in the Gulf. So you can see that, on the one hand, Libya is not Syria, or Syria is not Libya, and if the ongoing pressure continues, that this might actually backfire in such ways whereby it could engulf the entire region in warfare of sorts. There are, of course, other scenarios that are no less dangerous, and I think in the long term, perhaps more dangerous, which is the likes of Syria breaking up. And then you're going to have transnational, trans-ethnic remodeling of the region, whereby borders will have little meaning when it comes to security and warfare, including with Iraq, including with Turkey, including with Lebanon, including with Israel, and so on. The trans-frontier, the trans-ethnic, the tribal, all of that will come to play when the states like Syria start breaking up. In Israel-Palestine itself, there is two possible scenarios to what Abbas just did in the UN. One is he actually succeeds if the Israelis and the Americans can read the Palestinian state of mind well, they would actually accept what Abbas had just done. They were clever. They would have accepted what Abbas did. Because I think Abbas wanted to use this in order to advance his position in the peace negotiations. He actually wanted this as a backdoor way back into the bilateral process. And if that means getting what the end game of the peace process was supposed to be anyway, a Palestinian state, then that will certainly 18 years later, 20 years later, push the bilateral relationship forward. Israelis and Americans seem to say non-stop, hey, we don't have a problem with the Palestinian state, except it's when. And Netanyahu said in the United Nations, he said, we will recognize the state, but only after it makes peace with us. But groups don't make peace. States make peace. States can sign an agreement that can be guaranteed, and they could be then held accountable according to national law. PLO does not make peace. PLO can sign an agreement. PLO is a group, represents the people. But a state. So in fact, as I said, if they're clever, they would recognize what Abbas just did, even thank him for it. Because all what he wanted is to go back to the negotiations. Why? Because I think he's at the end of his rope. Because this could be the undoing of the Palestinian Authority and of Abbas himself. Because this could easily spiral out of control. And when this spirals out of control, that means this is the end of the Palestinian Authority. Whatever is going to remain of the Palestinian Authority will be some sort of marginalized security coordination with Israel under American auspices. And that will be considered fifth column. Those people will start being picked like in Afghanistan, assassinated and so on and so forth. That will lead definitely to a third, perhaps in this case, armed intifada in Palestine, and hence, again, you know the rest of the scenario. So these are serious scenarios. By the way, sorry, I'm going to manage to say something positive today. I'll get it right. Maybe you have it.
Well, I don't know. In 91, during the Gulf War, Scud missiles were going into Israel, and there was a communique that went from Tel Aviv to Baghdad. It was buried on the 9th page of the newspaper or something that said, one more Scud. And I noticed that, and it went by everybody. Nobody paid any attention. It was pretty clear to me a veiled threat of nuclear retaliation. So how do you relate that to what Assad is in Syria? Sure, in Syria.
Yeah. I thought you were going to help me out here. Are we going to go nuclear?
I'm not trying to escalate it to nuclear.
Yeah.
I'm a pest.
You don't sound like you're not. You know, to be honest, I don't know what I'm saying, to be honest. To be serious, I don't think there's a nuclear option in the Middle East. I don't think there's an Iranian nuclear option. I don't think there's an Israeli. Simply because once you use the nuclear weapons in the Middle East, within the Middle East, I mean, of course, Syria is next door. I mean, as soon as you hit Syria, you're going to be hit yourself. Personally. I think whoever uses nuclear weapons in the Middle East will no longer have a future in the Middle East. I mean, even as a presence, physical. Because let's say Iran got nuclear weapons, what's going to do? Nuke Israel? Well, first of all, it's going to kill a couple of million Palestinians in the process. It's not exactly pan-Islamic way of resolving any question. Two, it will be nuked back. That's not exactly very intelligent. A country that proved to us every day for the last, a regime that proved to us every day the last 30 years that it's survivalist to the maximum. That it will not take any risk, let alone reckless step that will lead to its end. And Secretary Clinton made it clear that anyone who touches Israel that way can be obliterated. I think she used the word obliterate, which, by the way, I don't know if that's what's very intelligent to say. So I don't think actually there's a nuclear option. Now, we keep hearing apocalyptic scenarios of the nature. That there are apocalyptic people in Israel and there are the same in Iran and so on and so forth. I don't take it seriously. The times that there were some serious nuclear threats, as you probably know, was in 1973. Around that time, when the Russians, Soviets at the time, and the Americans raised the alert when there was a major problem for them. Other than that, I really don't see a nuclear option. See, that's good news.